Meila. I'm from Mount Hope Chinese Association. I'm very happy to see you all here. We had a similar event in Mount Hope, our neighboring town, last month, actually in October, I believe. And it was a very successful evening. And Mount Hope Chinese Association itself, we have held different cultural events, also raising awareness about wake up to the CCP threat seminars. And we have also done that seminar in the interstate the church center, activity center. It was very successful. And we really also, a lot of us also live right here in Deerpark. We are very grateful for all of you. We are grateful for the town of Deerpark for giving us this space. And thank all the board members. We thank the Supervisor Spear. Thank you for being here too. And thank the board, thank Krista, and thank all of the board members for giving us this space to make this evening possible. We want the community to come together, to talk to each other, and also to, we have invited Ben Hedges. He has been a China reporter for over 16 years, an expert in the area. He's going to represent us, asking some challenging questions, and also Ben will introduce the two other distinguished guests. At the end of this, you can ask the questions. We welcome all of you, and Ben, you can take over. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Mela. Welcome everyone. So my name is Ben Hedges. I live in Otisville, so I'm your neighbor just over in Mount Hope. I was born in Hong Kong, and I graduated from the University of London with a degree in Chinese, London, England, not the one in Canada. And I've worked as a China journalist since then, doing various cultural shows. And obviously in that process, I've come into contact with Shen Yun Performing Arts, which, as you all know, I assume, is headquartered at Dragon Springs. And so the purpose of this event is to answer some questions, and you guys can all raise questions at the end. But first of all, we're just going to spend a little while. I'm going to ask some questions to these guys. So I'm going to introduce them first. So we have Levi Browde, who is the VP of the project office at Dragon Springs. And then we also have Dr. Sean Lin, who is a US Army veteran, and he is a committee member of an organization called Present Danger China. So welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
So first of all, Levi, my first question for you is for audience members and people who perhaps don't know, why don't you just fill us in on a little bit of background about Dragon Springs, its mission, and what facilities they have here in the town?
Sure. Again, Meila and everybody, thank you for having me, and appreciate the decor, and a couple of those cookies have my name on it. I can get to those afterwards, right? So yeah, with Dragon Springs is about a 400-acre property that is mostly in Deerpark, although it also spans into Mount Hope. There are really four distinct entities on Dragon Springs. Dragon Springs itself is a religious nonprofit. One of the entities it has is what we call the temple grounds, and these are sort of these beautiful Tang Dynasty Buddhist style temples. If you guys have ever seen pictures of old Kyoto, maybe it looks something like that, a little better, to be honest. So that's the temple grounds there. Then there's two schools, a New York accredited or New York registered academy, which is a boarding school, and there's also a college there, which is accredited with Nietzsche, which is the same organization that credits Yale, Harvard, and so forth. So both of these schools are registered with the New York Education Department. They have standard curriculums. People that graduate from the schools, especially the academy, mostly are trying to go to the college up there, but also go on to Columbia University, Kansas State University, other schools. And while they both offer standard curriculums, obviously there's a core competency in Chinese culture, language, performing arts. So those are the second and third entity. The fourth entity up there is also Shen Yun Performing Arts, and I'm sure everybody, unless you've been living under a rock for the last 10 years, has seen at least a poster or two. This is the Poor Performing Arts Company that was founded by practitioners of Falun Gong, and its mission is really to revitalize traditional Chinese culture, and it does that by putting that on stage in a very engaging program and touring the world and letting people see what real Chinese culture is before the rise of communism. The implication, of course, being how wonderful China could be after communism. So those are really the four elements that are on the campus up at Dragon Springs.
Now, I know that Shen Yun Performing Arts and Dragon Springs has had a challenging relationship with the Chinese regime over the years. With
That's
even
politely put it, yes.
Polite way to put it.
Yes.
With even the Chinese regime trying to persecute people overseas in the West, here in the US. I can give some examples of when I was at school in the University of London. The Chinese Cultural Club at our school was actually run by the Chinese embassy in London. And so they could control the Chinese foreign exchange students, they could set the narrative as to how they wanted China to be presented at a Western university. And actually some of the third-year students studying Chinese decided they didn't like this, the British students, and they created their own free Chinese culture club. And you can see a lot of this going on through different universities. You have the Confucius Institute, the Chinese Students and Scholars Association, and then we have more extreme examples, like, for example, quite recently, a Chinese spy was uncovered in Governor Hochul's office, who had worked for Governor Hochul and Governor Cuomo before her. So my question to you, Sean, is maybe you could give us more examples and tell us a little bit about how the Chinese regime reaches overseas to control the Chinese population and also espionage and these kind of things in the West.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Ling. I'm actually a Deerpark resident here. I'm very happy that having a seminar in my town here. And so to talk about your question, it's such a big question, how CCP try to influence the United States or even directly harass, suppress the American citizens in the United States, whether they are Chinese immigrants or even American people born in this land. So this is such a big question. Okay. So overall, I think we can talk about first about what kind of infrastructure they have in the United States. So besides we know the embassies and consulate, these foreign diplomat entities, right? These are official entities, and they also have a United Front work department, and these primarily focus on infiltrating, neutralizing any bad influence against the CCP. They call it bad influences, right? And then they try to infiltrate into the community, like you said, their control of the Chinese student scholar associations. And also, they also have the state media overseas branch, like the Global Visions, right? So, and they also nowadays, through social media like WeChat, try to influence the Chinese population here as well. So these are very important government entities, and at the same time, there are some non-official entities. For example, the CCP also work with local gangsters. Like in New York City, you have Fuqing gangsters, you have Chandler gangsters, and the CCP collaborate with them all the times. So this is a non-official entity. Of course, you mentioned about the Confucius Institutes. It can be look like just like cultural entity, but actually, it is supported directly by United Front. Okay, and then you also have nowadays new campaign is social media influencers. So they actually mobilize some of the social media influencers, try to walk the party lines so that they can control and influence. It's a major disinformation campaign they waged on the social media as well. And so these are the infrastructure, and then for different measures they can use, of course they can do intimidation, coercions. For example, even in Chinatown, New York City, how many Fukienese people need to send money back to home every month? And the CCP, from the embassy, from the consulate, can always manipulate on these people. If you, they call it, if you badmouth CCP, we will not allow you to send money back home. right? So it's a very easy way to control the community in Manhattan. So this is coercion, and then also they can threaten your family members, relatives inside China in order to make you in the United States to follow the CCP's orders, right? So many of the dissidents who escaped China, and they still are facing the situation that a family member inside China is being threatened or maybe interrogated by the government official, routinely. And so this happens all the time. And many of the Falun Gong practitioners, even they, very, very fortunate enough to come to the United States, they still have the situation that a family member being harassed or even detained inside China. So this is one way they can indirectly control the population here. And then they also building financial connection with some of the entity here or even individuals. Try to give the money for individuals so that they can operate like a quasi-spies. Okay, so these business entities or business personnel can easily be manipulated by the government. And recently, there's one interesting case. There's one guy called John Chung in Manhattan. He was actually a former gangster involving smuggling and smuggling drugs as well as human trafficking. He was sentenced before, and later on he was become informers for FBI. But these people, this guy John Chen actually was captured by the, CCP, utilized his connection in the gangster as well in the local community, and he became to work for the CCP and then try to influence the United States local election in Manhattan, in Brooklyn as well. And so these are the people the Chinese Communist Party can easily control. So there are different ways they operate in the United States. From money, from political pressure, from diplomatic pressures, from infiltration, from United Front operations. So there are so many ways they can influence the American community here.
All right, well, so I wanted to ask that to give a little bit of background on kind of what they do. And now I want to ask you, Levi, has Dragon Springs encountered this kind of interference?
It has since the very first day we broke ground. Actually, this goes back all the way to 2000. Shen Yun itself, it goes back to 2006. I think we broke ground. I think it was 2002 or 2000 or earlier, and it runs a full gamut. It runs from top-level diplomats. Pretty much, Shen Yun goes all over the world. These days, 200 cities each year across 5 continents, they have shows. Every single theater we go to, there is diplomatic pressure on the theater manager, owner, or at least the mayor of that town not to have the Shen Yun show. They give letters, they give emails, they give threatening phone calls. In some countries, in the Dominican Republic, for example, they chase down the president of the country to the airport to threaten him, to cajole, whatever they could do to get him to cancel the Shen Yun show at that country. So you get a lot of this diplomatic pressure. Then you get some of the espionage stuff that Sean's talking about. We had it just here in Orange County last year. We had 2 guys, they were caught up in an FBI sting that they didn't realize it was the FBI. They thought it was the IRS. They were trying to bribe the IRS to open up an inquiry into Shen Yun. Luckily, it was the FBI. They put them in jail. They were actually just sentenced, I think, last month. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. These are just 2 guys that we caught. We know this kind of stuff is happening all over the country in terms of trying to open up inquiries on Shen Yun, get government people to crack down on Shen Yun, and that happens all over the world. And then there's just basic thuggery. About 12 years ago, when Shen Yun travels, a lot of time they're by bus, and about 12 years ago we had buses simultaneously in Arizona, somewhere between Arkansas and Tennessee, and up in Montreal. And in one weekend, the tires on the buses were all slashed 3/4 of the way through. Not so they would instantly inflate, but they do so if when they heat up and you get on the highway, they'd burst. And this happened simultaneously, one weekend, 3 cities, 2,000 miles apart. So from that day forward, we've had to have security guard our buses 24/7 because they tried to vandalize the brake systems, the brake fluid, the tires, things of that nature. And then there's just, also keying off of something Sean said, Anybody who works at Dragon Springs, certainly with Shen Yun, and has got family back in China, it's a real threat. We had one of our principal dancers, Stephen Wong. He was getting on stage and performing last year during his tour, and suddenly gets a call and says his mom has been put in jail for 4 years. And so they will find family in China and they will squeeze, and they do this constantly. Our campus, I have an example right here. About at this point, this year it's gotten a lot worse, and I think it would be good to talk a little bit about why that is, but about once every 2 weeks we get an email like this. So we got this is a threat to come in and sometimes they're bomb threats, sometimes they're threats of mass shooting. We have threats of they're going to come in and kill and rape all of our female performers. This has escalated a lot, starting probably March this year. So there is a very vigorous, multifaceted, worldwide campaign to shut down Shen Yun, to target people that are at Dragon Springs, and unfortunately that also impacts us here at the headquarters, not just on tour. No.
And so, Sean, question for you. Why would the CCP want to do this to Shen Yun and Dragon Springs?
Yeah, to follow what Levi just said, this year is actually very, very unique because, give you a couple of examples. Actually, on May 18 this year, the PLAC, that's a Political Legal Affairs Commission in China, that's directly under CCP's Central Military PLA Commission. So PLAC's Director Secretary, Chen Wenqing, actually hold a conference. In this conference, he is specifically coordinate new campaigns against Falun Gong. Right? So several tasks he has already emphasized. So including monitor Falun Gong's activity overseas, especially any Falun Gong's campaign to expose CCP's crime, especially organ harvesting, and then also closely monitor Falun Gong's connection with the United States, the government, or political figures, if any of the sanction against CCP top leaders is involved. And they especially emphasize need to stop these actions at all costs. This is what CCP's specific task for doing this campaign. And then in June 17 this year, the Ministry of Public Security also have another special meeting regarding campaign against Falun Gong, as well as some of the overseas democratic parties. So in here, they especially emphasizing they need to win the battle against Falun Gong's campaign on the internet. And this is actually overall under Xi Jinping's guidance. Xi Jinping had a special guidance 2 years ago in October 2022, before the 20th CCP's Congress. And he emphasized in the past, 20 years, CCP basically failed in overseas campaign against Falun Gong because he see the growth of some of the media, and as well what you mentioned about Shen Yun successful to revive the traditional culture as well as expose CCP's crime. So Xi Jinping was very upset, and he reorganized the structure to campaign against Falun Gong. So in his direction, they specifically emphasize need a new approach against Falun Gong, and he also emphasized not just use their traditional way of infiltration as well, not just this way. And they actually also want to use the social media influencers, and they want to discredit Falun Gong and causing the public distrust as Falun Gong, and they spread out this information saying, the US government was bought by Falun Gong. So these kind of, disinformation campaign try to ruin Falun Gong's reputation, as well as attacking Shen Yun's operation. And so this is under Xi Jinping's specific guidance, and they have distributed resource in order to carry out this campaign. And they also set up a specific anti-Falun Gong office in the United States. And these unique office also have a new director. It's called Wu Xiuhua. And this is anti-Falun Gong office inside the United States, and it's equal to the 610 office inside China. So 610 office was actually created, specialized in persecuting Falun Gong from the beginning of the persecution, when it started 1999. So this is outside the judiciary system, and it actually have all the power to be in charge of Falun Gong. So now they have an office inside the United States, especially in charge of campaign against Falun Gong. So this is kind of remind us, we probably heard about CCP set up a police station inside Manhattan or other cities, right? So this is a long arm, it's a Chinese government's long arm suppression against any dissidents. So now with the new directive, they want to totally win the battle against Falun Gong. That's what their words. So they have this new office, new directive, and new money. And now the Ministry of State Security, MFS new director, his name is Chen Yixin. He's especially, emphasizing to battle Falun Gong in overseas. And he's coordinating many of these efforts too.
Yeah, going off what you're saying, so what I want to know, and I think maybe some people in the audience might know about this too, is that the New York Times recently published some negative articles about Shen Yun and Falun Gong, about 5 articles in 1 week, and then followed up with a few more articles. Is that just an organic event, or is there some sort of connection between these new directives from China and those articles?
Definitely, those articles serve as part of the big campaign against Falun Gong. I don't know whether New York Times know it or not. It's definitely part of the campaign efforts, because you very rarely to see a U.S. media have such a large effort, especially focusing on a religious group that being persecuted inside China. And especially when New York Times have their operation inside China, and they really cared about the market inside China, and why the New York Times coordinate or be part of these campaigns to suppress against Falun Gong. And you can look at the reports, many of the reports. I think Levi can tell more about the report. But overall, to my perspective, from the overall strategy that CCP want to wage new campaign against Falun Gong on social media, and we can see this time, in this case, they use some of the influencers against Falun Gong, and they also invite some of the interviewees to New York Times to do these so-called investigation. But many of these are groundless accusations, and I see the reporter Nicole Hong, and even though she looks like an experienced journalist, but to me, her father is actually a professor in Fordham University, and he's also a long-time guest for the CCP. He went back to China to talk about some you can say it's scholar exchange, but sometimes many of the tombs really in line with the party tombs try to, or Xi Jinping called, tell a good story of China, a good story of CCP. So I think that's very suspicious to see the New York Times came out systematic way to attack such a group that need the whole world to support them, because they are one of the groups that being most brutally persecuted inside China.
And do you have anything to add to that, Levi?
I think, this year has definitely been very different from past years, even though we've been facing repression from the Chinese regime right here on U.S. soil. But just to give you to expand on some of the examples, this gentleman, I don't know if you guys have ever seen something like this. This is an officer safety warning. And what happens is the FBI or other state police will issue this when they know someone to be an imminent threat, possibly armed and dangerous. This is the Chinese YouTuber that brought interview candidates and pitched the whole story to the New York Times. Months later, he was found to be in the area. He was making direct threats to stuff like Suicide Squad, things like that, to Dragon Springs. The FBI traced him back to his home. He was eventually arrested for illegal weapons possession charges, and he's now facing those charges. But he's been going on and on for years trying to translate Chinese communist propaganda against Shen Yun, Falun Gong, the broader community, into the West. And he was the guy who tipped off, by their own admission, this is not a secret, this is something that they openly talk about, the interview candidates on that article. And if you look at even some of those interview candidates, unfortunately, tragically, I mean, some of those folks have direct and open public ties to the Chinese government, and none of that's disclosed to the readers. So I would concur with Sean that this is definitely part of the broader campaign, that it's really looking to sabotage and hopefully shut down, that in their words, in their mind, shut down Shen Yun. Which, begs the question, like, why? It's a dance show. It goes around the show doing dance and music. I think you have to sort of look at it from the CCP's perspective. The Chinese regime gained power, maintains power, based on the idea that they're the legitimate shepherds of the Chinese nation, its people, and its culture. And they're not. It's a foreign import, and for 70 years they've been trying to tear apart their traditional beliefs, their religions, and inject Marxism into those people. And along comes Shen Yun, reminds the world that actually Chinese culture is very beautiful, it's very spiritual, it believes in a benevolent creator, and that directly challenges what the CCP is and how they maintain power over China. So in their eyes, Shen Yun is an existential threat. And I think this past year, for a variety of reasons, they've recognized, as Sean said, they've recognized their attempts to shut Shen Yun down has failed, and so they've pulled out all the stops. And even if the mechanisms of how they deliver sabotage to Shen Yun are not Chinese in nature, they might be institutions in America, things of that nature. I mean, look, if you're talking about people that are willing to openly bribe the IRS to try and open up an inquiry on Shen Yun, what else do you think they might be doing? And so we have seen a significant uptick, and I have no doubt that the New York Times, some of these stuff is very much a part of that.
And so, Levi, faced with all the things that you showed us, like threats, like the email you hung up with bullets and things, what precautions has Dragon Springs had to take to protect itself?
Well, I mean, I think there's, on the basic stuff, I hear a lot of comments about why is there security at the gates, and they've got dogs, and I hear stories about AK-47s. They do not have AK-47s. I don't know where that comes from. But yeah, there are guards at the gates, and there's dogs, and there's a real reason for that. And full disclosure, I've got 2 sons at the schools up there. And I would be very worried if they didn't have guards, given what we've been through. And just last month, we had a breach at the North Gate. 2 Chinese people in a Mazda Miata zipped through the North Gate. They made it all the way to the center of the campus before we were able to apprehend them. What were they doing there? They came from Massachusetts. It was a whole issue. So one of the answers to your question is physical security. And we do that partially by our own security and making sure those gates are guarded and making sure we have a correct security protocol for people that come on campus. But a large part of it is working well with our law enforcement, working with the FBI, working with the state police, Orange County Sheriff. They were the ones that caught these guys trying to bribe the IRS. They are the ones that caught this guy when he was in the area making threats. And so we tip our hats a lot to the law enforcement. They've done a very good job. It's a complicated problem of securing us and our community here. And so a lot of it has been, staying in close contact with them and making sure they understand the threat that we're facing and make sure they're just a phone call away.
Okay, and I understand from State Representative Scoops, forgive me if I got his title wrong, but I went to a fundraiser for him quite recently, and he said that he is bringing in a state law, or trying to get a state law passed, about if you point a camera at the entrance of a school, it's against the law if you install a permanent camera. And he said it's because someone has been doing that at the entrance to Dragon Springs. Maybe you could tell us about that.
Yeah, he mentioned that to us as well, which I think is a good idea. In fact, it's a little creepy that you could just set up a camera and point it at a school. Why do we allow that? I don't know. But it's especially a problem for Dragon Springs if you think about the population there. Because again, go back to our principal dancer, Steve, and his mother was sentenced to prison for 4 years. So anybody who goes in there, or those who have family there, if they know about that in China. Now, Stephen didn't have a choice because he's a public face, he's out on stage. A vast majority of the people that work there, whether they were doing janitorial duties or teaching or whatever, helping with construction, if they've got family back in China and you start taking pictures of them, guess what? Guess who gets a knock at the door at Shanghai or Beijing or Guangzhou, wherever they're from? So that represents a real problem, and I think luckily,
If people who live in the area who want to help, or if they see anything suspicious or something, what can they do to help?
I think multiple aspects that the people can help. One thing is that I definitely also want to emphasize the physical security, right? So if you see any suspicious activities, whether it's Chinese or whether it's American faces, because CCP can hire local thugs too, So if you happen to spot any of the suspicious activity, of course you can talk to local police or maybe reach out to FBI. And also, I think second aspect, I think local people will need to be aware that CCP try to infiltrate into local communities, and so you need to understand whether people have connection with mainland China. Some people, may unusually travel to China a lot or things like that. If you happen to notice some of these kind of situations, you also need to have an alert in your mind, right? And also, at the same time, I think people need to pay attention to the social medias, and especially TikTok or WeChat. People who are using these social media quite often, their mind is influenced, brainwashed, even indoctrinated with CCP's propaganda, disinformation campaign. CCP will always want a local community to hate a group, right? So this is common CCP tactic. It's divide and conquer. They want the local community to be divided. They want to instigate hatred, so they can spread lies against any like a Chinese Democratic Party or Falun Gong group, causing community to be against these people and want the community to hate these people. You need to alert. What's your notion come from? What's your a wrong impression come from? And so I think we need to understand how we need to safeguard our own rights. Our community need to be very diverse. Whether it's Chinese Democratic Movement members or it's Falun Gong practitioners, they are part of the member of the American community now. We need to be together to protect the community. It's part of our duty as well. And so I think this is a very important concept, that we cannot treat these people like a foreigner. Actually, many of Falun Gong practitioners, they are born in the United States. Many people are Caucasian, not just Chinese, right? And at the same time, many people, they suffer many years of persecution inside China, and they finally, very, very fortunately, I can say it's by the amazing grace of the Creator, they can come to the United States, the land of free, and they treasure this freedom very, very much. And I think they also appreciate the United States provide a safe haven for them. So I think they are full of this kind of appreciation in their heart. And I think as a community member, we need to embrace them, provide more support for those community people. And we don't want any of the victims of CCP persecution still feel they face discrimination or any hatred, instigated by the CCP in the United States, right? So that would be a very ridiculous situation. I think we need to safeguard the freedom in the United States. That's part of our duty. And I feel we can do more in this aspect. Thank you.
So, obviously this is a lot of background, folks, about, and maybe some, hopefully we answer some basic questions about, what organizations are up at Dragon's Wings and what we do, but maybe we could pivot a little bit to what this means for the community and kind of who we are and kind of a little bit more of a part of the reason or half the reason of why we're here tonight. And, look, let's be honest, it's a challenge. It is a predominantly Chinese community up there coming into rural New York, or somewhat rural New York. It's not really rural. I grew up in rural. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge culturally. It's a challenge in terms of change. And it's a challenge on both sides. You know, people coming here and living in a new country, trying to live out the new ways of how things are run here and operating. And folks that were born and raised here, suddenly you've got a big group of people coming in and building a community up there. And one of the things I would just say, and hopefully when we open up to questions, maybe we can pivot a little bit more towards this, you know, these community aspects and the dynamics that we face as a community, and hopefully answer questions that are on your minds about that. But I would just end with it is heartening to me, because again, I have two boys that went through the school system up there, through the academy there at the college, and a lot of these folks are patriots, I'll put it that way. I mean, a lot of them came from a place that was not so free. And, you know, it's lovely to sit down at the lunch table with my son's friends and talk about the writings of Thomas Jefferson and what happened with the framers and why they put this country together. And kind of, okay, so what does that mean here for our community here? And what does that mean as people coming to the country? What does that mean that people that were here, that welcomed us into their town? And recognizing those challenges and recognizing what we have in common. You know, because I hear a lot of, you know, I have a lot of Chinese friends, admittedly, and I hear a lot about Chinese culture, but some of the stuff that they talk about is not strictly Chinese. You know, some of the values that they hold are some of the values that shone through with our troops at Valley Forge. That shine through in some of our founding documents. I mean, there's a convergence here, and I think it would be good to start exploring that more. So it's an interesting thing to me, because it is you get a population of people that are fresh to the American ideal and sort of like, wow, this is really. Did you know about Thomas Paine? I was like, yeah, I know about Thomas Paine. We sort of have a discussion about that. So, you know, again, we there's definitely challenges, but in my mind, it's really coming together, and I think we could keep moving in that direction. So we certainly welcome questions. I mean, hopefully this is sort of informative in terms of a background. It is very challenging. There's a lot of heartbreaking stories here, but at the end of the day, we are a community, and we need to sort of figure out how to all to make this work better and better and better. So with that note, maybe hand it back to you.
Yeah, so the whole point of this this evening is to have an understanding between people. So we're now going to move to the second half, which is to answer people's questions. So Mela has the microphone, and if anyone wants to ask a question, just feel free. You can put up your hand.
Can I take a minute? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Based on past experience, so I want to suggest that for anyone asking questions, please don't take the chance to make a speech. We want to give a chance to everybody to ask a question. And also when you ask a question, we start with one question. If different people finish asking questions, then you can ask a second question. How's that? So anybody having a question, you can raise your hand now. You're the brave one.
There's been so much interest lately with people concerning drones.
The drones didn't come from Dragon Springs, I'll just tell you that.
No, let me tell you something. I've heard people of Western origin claim that. And what they basically said very bluntly was, those Chinese on the mountain are launching the drones. Okay, so, and my wife is a practitioner, and she suffered in China. She suffered the persecution in Beijing. My question is there anything ongoing where Dragon Spring is being surveilled by drones? Or possibly also risk of something happening with these drones?
I don't know much about all the drones going on in New Jersey. I've seen some news, and we're not getting a whole lot of information from the government about it, so it's hard to speak to that. Yeah, we occasionally have people flying drones over our property. It's a fairly regular occurrence, and you know, we just try and ignore it because, first of all, I think the laws in this country are just trying to catch up to what does it mean to have a drone and have airspace and have anybody that can fly stuff around, and then they're probably a little bit behind on that. It is especially disconcerting, again, from the population up there, where they came from, talk about a surveillance state. They came from a place where, it's pretty scary. So, but other than that, it happens sometimes. There's not much we can do about it at this point. I wish, there were rules where you can't fly drones over schools or something, but there aren't, at least that I know of. So we just kind of deal with it. But it's nothing like all the blinky weird lights I see in the news over New Jersey. I don't know what that is. I promise we didn't launch them. Yeah.
There I
Just
see
want to add a sentence.
My property faces New Jersey, and every night I see at least 5.
Oh,
Wow.
all right. Okay.
My property faces, if you're familiar with the area, High Point Park in New Jersey, that's Sussex County, New Jersey, and I am guaranteed to see at least 5 each night, and they're all different.
I watched Shen Yun show. I was always amazed by the dance performance, the high level of Shen Yun dancers. I guess maybe some of the CCP spies want to use drone, try to learn a dancing movements.
In regards to people that have been identified as a threat, whether it be from propaganda, hatefulness, or actual threats, how serious does local government take that? Are they treating it as hate crimes to try and deter people from getting on board with that type of behavior, or are they just treating it like a typical crime, like trespassing or harassment, or what are they doing as a deterrent to help prevent it?
I've found so far it's been a little mixed, and I think it's sort of Chinese spies kind of in America is still kind of a new game, relatively speaking, for our government. So they're still trying to catch up on which parts of that might fall under the hate crime laws and which not. But also, it did make me think of some of the stuff we talk about. The natural inclination is oh, it must be, Dragon Springs must be a real hive's nest of spies. Actually, it may be counterintuitive. It's actually the opposite. I mean, again, if you look at, Governor Hochul's office, and, there are spies out there, largely because the offices either have been compromised or they don't really know what they're dealing with. In terms of this topic, there's a lot of subject matter expertise in Dragon Springs, and it's very hard for a spy to sort of get up there. And I know it's counterintuitive, but kind of we can snuff them out pretty quickly. Whereas I think what we really need to start worrying about is, governor's office, Congress, other places where they might be getting into. Yeah.
I think you also make a good point. I think the local governments, whether it's county, whether it's this township, I think the local authority definitely can step up their efforts. One thing is to be understand more about the situation. Because as Levi said, it's relatively new game to people for American government to know about the CCP's the depths of their infiltration and how much influence they have.
Yeah.
Right? So I think these part need education. I think local government could definitely try to have more of these. Maybe can have education sections, right? And then I think there are different ways to try to monitor, some suspicious activity. But there are so many cases. One thing very challenging is that the CCP using civil-military fusion strategy. So under the new national security law, in China, every citizen need to collaborate with Chinese government if they want your information based on the so-called national security demands, right? So even if you are overseas, if the government say, we want you to provide certain information, they have tried to use different ways to force Chinese citizens to collaborate with the government. So that's why it's hard. I think FBI is overloaded with so many potential Chinese spies
I was
cases.
just more wondering, a perspective of, I hope they're not treating it like a slap on the hand, because like you said, people are influenced, right? So you don't want grassroots people that are not really informed on how tragic and horrible communism is, and then they're recruiting people here. So I was wondering if the one guy that the FBI wound up picking up, are they gonna treat that like a slap on the wrist because they weren't able to execute on something, or do they take it very serious? Because I feel the more serious they take it, the more it deters other people from jumping on board, so.
Yeah, I think my observation is overall there's a growing awareness about the severity of the CCP's infiltrations or some of the long arm suppressions tactics. And so some of the cases we see FBI treated seriously, and even your mayor's aides are being investigated for his connection with CCP, right? So there are some cases they treating this very seriously, but overall, I think the scope of the CCP's infiltration and malign influence, I think is still people. I think the United States government just touched the surface yet.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Do you want the mic?
Oh,
One
I've got a
question.
loud voice. Does Dragon Springs do any surveillance?
Of who?
Do you take photographs of people going up the mountain? At the entrances?
We've got security cameras at our
You have
entrances.
security cameras,
We do,
okay, at
yeah.
both entrances?
We do,
And
yeah.
also down at the Never Sink River. Okay, is correct?
That's
So do you trespass on land that isn't yours?
No.
That isn't, really?
Yeah.
Now, I live at Guymard Lake, and I think I've spoken about this before. And a lot of people were working out at the lake on Guymard Turnpike, and somebody says, well, who are all those people on your land at my beach area? They were Falun Gong. Somebody went down and said, you're trespassing, you shouldn't be on the property. And they left.
Well,
So-
before they answer, I want to also ask that when we ask questions, please focus on Dragon Springs and also, the related topics. Because today we are not talking about in-depth issues about Falun Gong. But when we do talk about Falun Gong focused issues, you are welcome to ask these type of questions. But that being said, you want to wait until they answer, or you want to say something now?
I just wanted to ask in regards to her, is your property marked as private property? Because
Of course it's marked.
okay, because I frequent that area, and I personally wouldn't know that certain areas are private. I'll go down by the river, so sometimes we also have to take responsibility to maybe put up a sign and say private property, because it might not be with malicious intent.
We've owned land for 300 years.
understand.
We know how
I'm
to
just
take
giving
care
a
of it.
So
and
may I?
That's good.
May I? So,
Thank you.
Grace, I can't speak to all Falun Gong people at Epic Times, any of that. I mean, if you have people trespassing on your land, I think you should take the appropriate action, as would we. That's not something we would authorize or do. But I don't, again, I'd like to encourage people to ask your questions more sort of if you have questions about what happens at Dragon Springs, how we operate, how we interact with the community, this is your chance. I mean, this is one of the reasons we wanted to come down here. I know we gave you a lot of background because our background is non-traditional. If we were a group of Christians or Buddhist monks, we wouldn't have to maybe introduce all this stuff. There's no persecution, but we sort of have to give you a bit of a background. But the real purpose of tonight is to open things up. And do you have questions that impact the community and how we interact and what we're doing? I know, I'm not so stupid. Sometimes I'm not very bright, but I'm not so stupid to think that there's not rumors out there. I know there are. And maybe this is a chance we can open up and talk about those. And, again, go ahead and ask your questions. Yeah.
So I think there's a gentleman behind who wants to ask a question now.
Sure.
Yes, good evening. Deerpark Commons had been proposed 5 or 6 years ago to be built, and then it was pulled. Just this past year, it was proposed to be built, and I was wondering, is that the same Deerpark Commons that was, or close to the same Deerpark Commons that was proposed 5 or 6 years ago? This would have a lot of effect on our local communities. As far as the design of that went, it was 4 times the size of Dragon Springs.
Sorry, just to clarify, when you say Deerpark Commons, you're talking about the development plan that was like the Upper Galley Hill area?
Yeah, that's
like
Comeback
Lake
Farm,
Helen?
whatever, yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
You know, with the village,
Mm-hmm.
ancient Chinese village, large hotel, you know, park. Something like 400,000 gallons of wastewater treatment plant would be dumped into the Basher Kill at that point. Dragon Springs proper is 100,000 gallons. So, you know, at that point, we're putting 500,000 gallons a day into the Basher Kill, into the Neversink River. At the same time, the concrete plant was proposed by the same people, by Dragon Springs, by Allen, and they were both.
Could I want to stop you, but there's already 3 questions here. Look, can I get
Okay,
those?
it's all about Deerpark Commons. I mean, if it is the same Deerpark Commons that was proposed 5 or 6 years ago, or has it changed drastically?
It sounds like you know more about Deerpark Commons than I do. I have no idea what the plan is there. I've heard about the plans. You know more about, I guess, the wastewater volume than I do. I have nothing to do with that, so I don't know. I can't speak to that. During the course of your conversation, you mentioned 100...
designed for 100,000 gallons per day of wastewater treatment.
Into the river.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's not happening. Just so you know, just to sort of set the basics out, Dragon Springs has a modern wastewater treatment system, goes through UV at the very end, one of the best you can get on the market today, and that goes into a leach field. Doesn't go anywhere near any body of water, let alone a river. And it's certainly not 100,000 gallons. So I can't speak to the Deerpark Common plans. I just don't, I have no knowledge of that. I don't operate that. We at Dragon Springs aren't dealing with that right now. Yeah.
I've lived here my whole life. My family owns 200 acres in Mount Hope, and we overlook Dragon Springs and the situation. And we followed this along for so long. I know the wastewater treatment plant, the system, and again.
So you know we don't put anything in the river then, right?
Did you see it put in the river?
Excuse me?
Did you see?
I couldn't guarantee you where it goes. But
I could, and the DEC could, that comes in to inspect our plant multiple times every year.
yeah,
So,
yeah, we got the right.
okay.
But again, you can't tell me if Deerpark Commons is the same or not.
I don't
You know,
have any.
in our towns, both Deerpark and Mount Hope, we have master plans that were designed and engineered and planned, you know, and you guys have slipped into them without being in them. And if you were to do Deerpark Commons as big as it is, I mean, this would have a major effect on all our roads.
Okay, yeah, again, I know nothing about Deerpark Commons or what the plans are there.
Yeah. That's the problem, you know, we live together now, we need to know these things.
Oh, I'm not saying you don't need to know, I just think, I'm not the guy.
I got you.
Dragon Springs isn't the guy, so I can't speak to that, yeah.
Any other question?
I got one.
Behind you, Mel.
Are you able to share any economic statistics to do with how much Dragon Springs is spending locally or within the state? You know, economic impact. Local economic impact in any kind of statistics that way.
I don't have any readily available. I know they did have a third party do a study of that probably 10 years ago, but that would have been pretty old. I do, this touches upon, I don't know if this is where your question is going. I know there's been some grumblings about the fact that we are a religious nonprofit and we don't pay tax on the land. And I think what most people, first of all, that's the law of the land. If you have a concern or don't like the way that is done, that places of worship, places that are religious places are tax exempt. I can't help you there. I think what you're overlooking, though, is a vast majority of the people that work at Dragon Springs, and some even the fact that live there, have homes in the area. And they move in, and they build those homes, and they pay people, and they pay local taxes. I pay taxes that go to the Mini-Sink School District. My 2 boys go to school at Dragon Springs. I'm paying for an education I'm not getting. And that is true for a large number of people. So I think we need to, I understand it's not perhaps ideal financially for the local area, but I think it is eclipsed many, many times over by the fact, if you look at the sheer number of people, and, you know, I don't think I'm going out on a limb to say some really good family-oriented people, which means they're going to build steady neighborhoods, steady communities. Their homes are going to be well kept. They're going to maintain them. They're going to participate in the local economy. And that is for sure what's happened, not just across Deerpark and Mount Hope, but on into Middletown, on into Port Jervis. And so I think you do need to look at the whole picture of what's happening there. And it's not a ruse. You know, we didn't pull anything over on you. That is a place of worship, for sure. And if you look across the country, you have many, many examples, monasteries, religious schools, all across the country that do the exact same thing we do. So I think that's what I would say to that question.
I didn't mean to put you on the defensive. I'm just curious about how much money gets spent.
Yeah,
So.
I understand.
And I'm terrible.
You don't have to worry about putting me on defensive. That's kind of why we wanted to have tonight, so we can open up and talk about these issues. So, yeah.
Can I also provide a broader perspective, you know, from what you communicated here? You know, I realize I'm actually, you know, immigrants to the United States. So when I first immigrated in the United States, a lot of things is a big challenge for me. To understand the local culture, to understand the local regulation, to understand, you know, how the local government works, how American people work. A lot of times it's a culture shock to new immigrants. So I think a lot of times maybe it's a communication gap between the new immigrants versus the local residents. And this takes time. You know, many years ago, I had a chance to visit a Vietnamese community in Los Angeles. They are hardcore Vietnamese, actually escaped from the communist persecution, and they still had an exile government. And I talked to those people. Some people are very senior, and they told me how much they suffered when they first landed in the United States, escaped from the war. You know, how much they need to learn. They face the family separation. They are stressful all day. They still worry people in their home, just like the people who are being persecuted by CCP. They're still worried about their family member inside China, and they still try to accommodate life here, and they try to find a job. How do they survive when they land into a new places? They may have no skill. How to survive? So they are very stressful. They may not have the language to understand local regulation. They may not have the language to understand local culture. So it takes a lot of time. So the Vietnamese senior, it's a senior minister in the exile government. He told me, he observed, it takes at least 2 generations for a local immigrant, for an immigrant to really accommodate to a local culture. So it's not an easy thing. Just my perspective.
Can I add on that note? I want to say as an immigrant, I am extremely grateful for the town, for the residents, for the United States, for the Constitution. That is why me and many people like me, especially the people who have faith, who follow truth, compassion, and tolerance, are extremely, I would say, patriotic. We love this country, the United States, and the people as our own. We are deeply grateful for a chance to live a normal life as any other human being. Because in China, you know, it's just like the Truman Show. It's all controlled. It's a big prison. We have a chance to break free from there, and we can live, we can work, we can make friends, we can practice our faith. It is beautiful. It's a life that we believe is given by the Creator, but it's through your kindness, through your acceptance and your support that we can live a life like you. But in the process, also from what just shared, I understand that there are a lot of things we can learn. And I apologize for, apparently, like what just Grace shared, that maybe people don't understand that by the lake is not a public land. So, but if you communicate to us, communicate to me, I will make sure to pass that information along. For all of my friends, the people in the community, the community, especially the community of faith, who believe truth, compassion, and tolerance, they will not make the mistake twice. So first of all, I apologize. Also, I want to thank you and I appreciate. I just want to add to that note.
I think you guys understand we have some concerns about the Chinese regime, and there's tentacles here. I want to prioritize first about questions I think are more relevant to the community here. Concerns you have about Dragon Springs, ideas about how to work together. We have, obviously there's a security concern. We can't just open the doors and let anybody in at any time, but we have started to have more people up there and start to give tours and walk through the schools and see how the kids are educated, see how the dancers train, and I think we want to try and do more of that as long as we can do it safely. So this is, I think, a chance for questions. It's also a chance for ideas, because, we're certainly not perfect, that's for sure, and we might not have thought about ways that we can help kind of people understand more about what we're doing and help us in the Dragon Springs community do better as a member of the community in general. So I'd like to sort of, let's hit those questions. I mean, Grace, if you want to address this, and Sean, we can come back to this.
Yeah.
But I'd like to stay
maybe
here.
Afterwards, you can.
I'd like to stay here for a minute before we go back to that, because I'm guessing that's a little bit more interesting to everybody here in the room. So
we are not investigators.
So.
Okay, one second. That's a second question. Let me stick to my rule. Any other questions? Because someone raised their hand, second hand.
Two in the back.
Gary Spears, I'm the supervisor in the town of Deerpark. I just want to shed a little bit of light on some of the questions. They're very legitimate questions. I know Grace has an issue about people trespassing, which could happen to anybody. So I think stuff like that can get handled. But a couple of issues that have come up, I know Frank had a good question about the project that was on Upper Galley Hill Road that was proposed by a gentleman named Alan Adler maybe almost 10 years ago. That has been pulled, sat dormant for a long time. I understand now that that may come back. I don't have too much information on it, but again, when something like that comes, there'll be announcements, there'll be planning board meetings, there'll be public hearings on stuff like that. What they do have, Frank, now that's operational at Dragon Springs, an 18,400 gallon sewage treatment plant that's been approved by the DEC and is regulated by them. I don't believe they have any discharge yet into of any of the rivers. They have proposed, and you are correct, as they go forward, they're proposing a 100,000 gallon treatment facility as their facility grows. To answer the gentleman's question about benefit to the community, they have bought a lot of local products through lumber companies, through concrete companies, through stone and issues. They've used a local Deerpark paver at one time to pave their roads. We've had a long history with Dragon Springs, as everybody knows. We continually try to improve the relations with them. I think the residents up by Frank and Grace had legitimate concerns about the deterioration of the road over the years from the heavy construction. With conversations with representatives of Dragon Springs. Dragon Springs has paved Guymar Turnpike from the Mount Hope line down to the bridge at their expense, working with our highway superintendent. They also allowed us to take out a little bit of a dangerous curve for better visibility. So we're trying to address both the residents' concerns and Dragon Springs' concern. They also paved from HBE School into the bridge on Galley Hill Road. A project such as Alan Adler's, if it goes forward, I think the planning board at this time would ask them to pave or widen that whole road, and that would be something that the town could do in future negotiations. So just to answer people's questions here, it's been a storied past. No questions, people on both sides have made problems, have had problems. We continue to work with them to help them get better. If you understand their background coming from communism or trying to be protective of their residents. It presents a problem in our culture because we need to be very forthcoming. It's been a problem. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. We work through it all the time, try to make it better. One of the questions was about local police or whatever. We have done whatever's needed as a local police force for trespassing if they're called or any issues. We did have a local issue with a resident that was unhappy with them that threw some nails and stuff out, but it was handled through the courts. It was handled properly. So again, to everybody here, we're trying to build a better relationship. It's not perfect. It's a day-by-day thing. We're working now with New Century, who have been very good. They've come to all the planning board meetings. They presented their plans. You know, it goes through the process. In New York, we have a book, a planning book, or regulations through the DEC, regulations through Orange County Health Department. They all have to be followed. It's a tedious process. Takes years at sometimes. So they have been very forthcoming at New Century doing that. We're getting great cooperation from Dragon Springs now. So again, nothing's perfect. In my life, nothing's perfect. Hopefully it's better for you guys, but we're continually trying to make this better. Hence the meeting tonight to allow them to use the facility, to ask residents questions. So if you have any other questions, please ask them. If there's a question that I can answer, I'd be happy to step up and answer them. So that's what I had to say. Thank you.
Just want to tell a little personal story based on a little what Gary is talking about. Look, there's obviously a history here, and I think, yeah, there's been some difficulties on both sides, and it's not all malicious. Most of it is not malicious, I would say. Almost none of it is. Some of it is cultural, some of it is communication, some of it is, you know, I remember walking down the street in Manhattan. I was with one of my Chinese friends who had just come out of China recently, and we were coming up to a barricade, you know, where the police were like, you know, separating out where the parades of the police are there, and there are 6, 7 police cops. And my friend froze. And it was just sort of this fear took over her. And I sort of recognized that. And so we sat down and had a talk, and it's just sort of like, it's a visceral kind of reaction to police, because in her country, those are the guys that beat down the door and take you away in the middle of the night, literally. And so I had to, you know, she knew intellectually, in this country, no, these are the good guys, by and large. You know, but it took some time, right? It took some time to sort of realize, and I think that's true of governmental processes here. That's true of methodologies, of building codes, of, you know, all kinds of things that sort of, it is a learning process. There is a cultural aspect to this. It's not the whole story. It's not malicious. And so it's been a long sort of journey on the cultural side, on integrating to a new home. And I will say, you know, I sometimes get jokes from people who are not from here that say, oh, you got a bunch of Chinese people up in Deerpark. I bet you a lot of those people hate you. And I was like, no, that's not true at all. That's another stereotype. That's where the people here have been fantastic. And so, you know, I would, you know, I'm not, let's address the problems, but let's not make them bigger than they are as well. And we can overcome this stuff. None of this stuff is very malicious, and generally on both sides we've got great people here. So anyway, when you were talking, Gary, that sort of story came to my mind as sort of an illustration of, at least on the cultural side, and you know, we're dealing with some differences and getting over things. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah, first timer.
Hello, my name is Kathy, and I'm a ordinary resident nearby here. And I have been noticed that in this area, because of the Dragon Spring, bringing a lot of the people here, and give me a wonderful experience when I moved to here. So I also aware that I moved from Florida here, so I also aware that a lot of people they are like traveling overseas to experience the Chinese culture, or like traveling to Japan to experience the Asian culture right there. So I'm wondering that if Dragon Spring will have planned to establish a kind of tourism, like for a traveler, they don't need to travel overseas, but come over here to experience authentic Chinese culture here.
This also is what a lot of people ask. They know that there's this Chinese, compound with temples and architecture and things, and they want to visit, and they want to ask, when is it going to be open to the public? I think is that kind of what you're asking, right?
No. This is not my question.
Okay.
My question was because, I see there's a lot of beautiful land and scenic surrounding area, and I think this is a good economic opportunity for the local residents to bringing more money coming and more visitors come over here, and have everybody get well.
I think I got it. I mean,
She's asking for even more, an expansion.
Okay. I'd say a couple things to that. I grew up in a place like Deerpark, in northern New Mexico, a tiny little town called Cedar Crest. I loved it, and I remember, and then I had to, went to college and had to live in the city forever. It's like, and I came back here, I was like, this is great. There's a certain environment here, largely rural, that I think a lot of us hold dear, and I think, I think we'd want to balance things and make sure that that's something we preserve. I think a lot of us, I would assume, enjoy the lifestyle that we have here. But putting food on the table is important, and a lot of the country is hurting, especially in the rural areas, and so bringing in economic development, is a lifeline. It's really important. So I think it's a balancing act. I would say that there is a cultural element here. I wasn't kidding when I asked you if you've ever been to downtown Kyoto. Dragon Springs kind of ruined me because I went to Kyoto, which is supposed to be the most exquisite, amazing example of that era of temples, and it was like, what we have in Dragon Springs is better. And so the plan has always been to open up to some extent, and I'm not going to sugarcoat you, that creates all kinds of problems right now, security, infrastructure. That's why I think why there's some of these other projects. I'm not sure, I don't know the details of everything that New Century is planning, but there's a cultural element there that could bring in some economic activity, and I think that's a good thing. We can't have it be exactly the same. We're going to have to build something if we want to bring people in and have more activity. And I think, not lose all of our young people. We don't want to be one of these areas where everybody can't wait to graduate and leave and they never come back. That's really a sad place. And so, just for me personally, I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling from my personal perspective. I'd want a place where we can largely maintain our livelihood, but we've got to have enough activity where we're not going to lose a whole generation in 10 years. And that's a huge problem all across America. So that's what I would say.
Maybe I could add something actually to what you're asking as well, but there is a lot of development of related groups in Middletown. When I moved here in 2019, that street in Middletown, North Street, it was kind of like a ghost town with a lot of boarded up stores and stuff, right? And it just felt like a town where a lot of the young people had moved to New York City, perhaps. I know they had that big mall open in Wallkill as well, which also led to a lot of stores moving out of North Street. But there's been a lot of businesses that have some relation to Dragon Springs or Falun Gong opening up in Middletown, and also the Northern Academy School, Little Lotus Academy School, several different developments on the west side of Middletown.
The medical center there?
And the medical center, yeah. And actually all of that, the new sidewalks on the western side of Middletown that they've been doing over the past year or so, that was from the Mayor Joe DeStefano explained that was from a grant they got from the state that was largely because of all the buildings that have been sold to people who are have some sort of connection with Dragon Springs. So they certainly, maybe it's not quite this area yet, but the west side of Middletown is kind of a lot of what you are sort of talking about. Yeah, has been happening over there.
Any other questions for the first timer? Okay.
I actually have a question because a lot of people are curious about what kind of lifestyle the people living in Dragon Spring in the mountains. Is there any way you can share with us? And another thing, for instance, now this is the holiday season. Do you actually celebrate Christmas like everybody else?
They have the most epic game of Secret Santa I've ever seen. Yeah, it's school-wide, actually. They've got this big, in the Student Activity Center at the main education building there, they've got probably a 30-foot Christmas tree, and it's a school-wide Secret Santa. So it's, a couple things about that. I think, again, this touches upon like a little bit of the rumors. Most of the people that work up there don't live there. So, I mean, I go there every day as a volunteer. I live on, where do I live? Guymar Turnpike. So a lot of people are commuting. So it's really what it is. And, you know, the fact that there's a lot of Chinese culture there actually means we get twice the holidays because we can celebrate Christmas, but we can also celebrate Chinese New Year and Mid-Autumn Festival. And so there's a lot of holidays there. And the other thing I would say, there's some epic talent shows. I don't know if you guys ever sat through talent shows. Usually, you know, in the old middle school I was at in New Jersey, I mean, the kids are cute, but come on, it was not very talented, by and large. But, you know, you have world-class dancers, world-class musicians up there, so when the kids get together and put on a talent show, it's pretty epic. So, probably didn't answer your question, but it's some insight as to what it's like.
Maybe we allow one last question because we've prepared a lot of Christmas cookies, a lot of goodies and tea, and also they are called pan stickers, right? Fried dumplings. So one last question, if nobody has, for the first rounders, anybody? If not, I will give the mic to the one who raised hand before. Okay.
Sorry. It's like a big event and it kind of like welcomes, you know, like the cultural exchange and kind of like warms people up to each other. So I was wondering if you guys have any plans of action for that, because like I know like my like minor education on like Falun Gong is from years ago, just passing a stranger, an American woman. She gave me a book and I read it, so I had like some insight. So I think that's really important to cultivate like education so people understand like what you guys believe in, or like she had mentioned like what holidays you recognize, and it just makes it easier, I think, to close a cultural gap. But I understand the security stuff where you can't just invite everybody in. But inside the community, do you guys have plans to do that more often or in different ways?
Yeah, maybe I can answer a little bit first, because every year New Century has the Moon Festival, which actually you might recognize I'm normally the MC for. So more so in previous years, I've recruited a whole group of people now who do it. But yeah, we have the Moon Festival, which is the most popular festival at that location. Which is celebrating Chinese Mid-Autumn Festival, which is you know, an important festival in the Chinese calendar and the calendar of a few other Asian countries. Then in Mount Hope, the Mount Hope Chinese Association has the Dragon Boat Festival, which is in, remind me which month it's in, Mela?
Usually June.
June, right? It's in June. So that's either 1 or 2 days in Mount Hope. So that's another one that you can check out. And
Chinese New Year.
Chinese
New Year already,
yeah.
already scheduled for February 8th next year.
Oh, right, in Mount Hope, yeah, which is an indoor event.
Yeah, this year will be.
And a lot of these events will have not people from Dragon Strings, but Shen Yun Performing Arts has now a training center that trains outsiders in the same curriculum that people study up in Dragon Springs. So they're not really at the professional level, but they're studying the same Chinese classical dance, and they actually perform at most of those festivals. So the Moon Festival, the Dragon Boat Festival, and the Chinese New Year Festival. So, you know, you can kind of learn a little bit more about it from those festivals that we hold. Those are the 3 main ones we have now. And of course, you could go and see a Shen Yun show in New York City or Connecticut. Connecticut's a bit cheaper. But yeah, you guys want to?
I also want to add, since you talk about festival, I actually really appreciate the New Century have the Freedom Festival for the Independence Day. And I think it's an effort for the community trying to, you know, integrate more with the American culture. and showing the patriotic spirit. I think really, really good. And actually, I think the town should have more people come to join the festival. And I really appreciate, as a veteran, definitely appreciate this kind of activity. And also, I feel, there are maybe some rumors, there may be some misunderstanding, but I think we can all blame it on the CCP. That's because of persecution, that's because of their long-arm suppression, so they have to have enhanced security. So who's to blame? It's the CCP, right? We cannot allow any of the CCP's supported action success in the United States, right? So we need to safeguard our security first. So I think we clearly know who to blame. And at the same time, I think, in the long run, I think maybe the local will see that we will be very proud of the community. At the beginning, we may have, feel, oh, this is a foreign group. And then later on, we see, oh, this is a part of our community. And maybe later on, we will be very proud of the group. Because I think what Falun Gong teach about is truthfulness, benevolence, forbearance, right? This is a value transcends all culture. I think every people from all ethnic group can embrace it. And I feel in the long run, everybody will benefit from it. Thank you.
Did you want to add anything, Levi?
No, I'm good.
Okay, well, I hope that kind of answers your question somewhat.
So this is a beautiful evening, and everybody who spoke, I really especially thank you for asking questions. And please stay and ask more questions if you still have more questions. Or you can just simply say hi to each other. We prepared a beautiful Christmas tree here. Thank you, Jane. And also a lot of stuff that you can eat. They're making it hot, right, for the dumplings. Please stay, make some new friends, shake more hands, and enjoy your Christmas. Thank you so much. Thank the panel for the outstanding evening. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Thank you. So that concludes our evening.
Okay.